Good morning, friends. Welcome to our new, hopefully short-lived way of doing church. Right now, we are fully digital with no live services. I miss seeing you all. I miss the fullness of this room on Sunday morning. I miss the energy of having different people coming in. But the important thing is we're still together, and we're still talking about this wonderful Jesus who loves us, who is changing lives. And so that is always going to be the main thing. We're going to have a couple of songs of worship for you in just a second, and then I'm going to bring the message. This all feels new. I was doing the sermon with just a couple of people in the room with me, and it just feels different. So we'll get better at this, but the main thing is that you're participating in it with us, and we're excited about that. Just a couple of things to keep you updated with. I sent out an email suggesting that we gather together to pray as community across all the different houses that we're in at 9 and 6, 9 in the morning, 6 in the evening. But as I've talked to a couple of people and thought through that, we're going to change that a little. We're going to gather at 12 p.m. every day, and we're going to do it for 12 minutes. Doesn't matter if you're just sitting, reflecting. You don't have to pray out loud and continuously for 12 minutes, but just that time of just knowing that for those 12 minutes, every 12 o'clock, every lunchtime-ish, we're gathering together, we're praying for this world. We're praying for this nation and our leaders, for wisdom, for the doctors, the nurses, the hospital cleaning staff, the orderlies that are working through this situation. We're praying that God would keep them safe, give them wisdom. We're praying for our loved ones. We're praying for our church during this time. We're just praying. We're asking God to move in this situation. So we'd love it if you would join us and send us your stories about how that's working in your family. And then another thing that I'd just love to remind you of is that we want to keep the church financially healthy during this time. So we would love it if you would help us by continuing to give in the way that you so faithfully do, week in, week out. You can go to OneChurch, Clifton Park.org, and there's a give link. If you've never done online giving before, it's safe, it's easy, and it really helps us out. If you want to be old school, then we have no problem with that. The church building is still here, even though we can't use it. And you can drop by and drop in a check or cash like you usually do. It's not the same as Sunday morning, but it still helps us keep doing what we're doing as a community. So thank you for doing digital worship with us. I'm going to turn you over to Susie, Amanda, and Joe and the team, and we're going to worship together.
I've heard 1,000 stories of what they think you're like, but I've heard the tender whisper of love in the dead of night. You tell me that you're pleasing, that I'm never alone. You're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. Who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. I've seen many searching for answers far and wide, but I know that we're all searching for answers only you provide, because you know just what we need before we say a word. You're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. hardly speak. Please, so unexplainable, I can hardly think as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still into love. Love, you're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. To us. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us.
You unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies till all my fears are gone. I'm no longer slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer slave to fear. I am a child of God. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Love has called my name. I've been born again into your family. Your blood flows through my veins. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer slave to fear. I am a child of God. Child of God, you split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears were drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and sing. I am a child of God. I am a child. God, I am a child of God.
Good morning, friends. Man, what a journey we've been on the last couple of weeks. We've gone through this sort of sense of we're moving a whole community from analog to digital. We are welcoming you to the first digital service, the first digital-only service. If you're visiting online, my name is Alex. I'm the lead pastor here at OneChurch. And we've had this sense, haven't we, friends, of moving everything suddenly, quickly to, now we're digital. And it's been tough. And one of the questions I always have when we go through times like this is, what do we even talk about as a group of people now? Do we keep just talking about the same stuff that we were talking about? And my feeling is you have to talk about the elephant in the room. The elephant is in the room and he's huge. He takes up the room. And that's scary. Lots of us would say that our emotions at the moment are bordering on anxious, fearful, all those different things, those words that are similar. We're walking through a time as a group of people that we've never walked through before. And that's going to be nervous. Change is nerve-wracking even when it's good. And change that's like this is super difficult. So we're going to talk about the elephant in the room. But I also want us to keep the sense of, well, as followers of Jesus, one of the things we believe is that this time where we're walking towards Easter is an important time. It's not just a normal time. And resurrection is the big story in the universe. Sometimes we get a little lost in this moment. Yes, the elephant is in the room, but the room isn't the only story. There's this bigger universe that this God made that's beyond the room. And we need to remember that this resurrection changes everything. So over the next couple of weeks, what I'm hoping we can do is talk about the elephant in the room, but also remember there's that bigger story beyond it as well that impacts the thing with the elephant in the room. We've been experiencing this COVID-19, the coronavirus. And when you walk through something like that, it's changing us. It's challenging us. It's doing all those things to us. And naturally, there's that sense of, I'm fearful. So before we get into anything else, I wanted to help us think about how we deal with our fear. Now, if you can remember, track back with me, those of you that have been with us for a while, think back before Christmas. We talked about anxiety, how at Christmas we experience anxiety in a completely different way. Something ramps up our anxiety, and when we talked about it then, we talked about it with the sense that when we get past the new year, it'll ease up, everything will be better. And past the new year, we're like, How many of you are at the point with 2020 where you're like, is there a 90-day return period? I'm not sure I'm feeling this year. Can I have some more of 2019, please? There's that, I don't know if I like this. And so when we talk about anxiety, it's maybe higher now than it ever was at Christmas. For most of us, that's probably the truth. And we looked at, well, how do we deal with anxiety? What even causes that sense of anxiety? And you have two nervous systems. You have your sympathetic and you have your parasympathetic. Now, your sympathetic is that sense of, it's what causes fight or flight. It's the thing that in the past, back before we lived in houses, would have made the difference between you either being food or catching food or one of those two things. And then the other side, we have the parasympathetic. That's rest and digest. It's that peaceful moment. It's that ability to do normal, everyday things. When your body kicks into that sympathetic mood, that fight or flight, you can't do the normal things. Everything about you tenses up. One of the other words used for that sympathetic nervous system is freeze. You freeze when that happens. Your breathing gets tight. Everything feels tense. Isn't it interesting? COVID-19, coronavirus, it is a sickness, a virus that can cause a problem with your breathing. And yet for centuries, people have said breath is also spiritual. In most old languages, the word for spirit and the word for breath are the same thing. In Greek, pneuma, breath, and spirit. In Hebrew, ruach, breath and spirit. There is something spiritual about that breathing experience. When you get anxious, your breathing stops. It causes this disruption in the holistic being that we are. Every part of us is disrupted. And when we breathe properly, we find it actually can bring peace in unimaginable ways. Incredible things happen when we choose to just breathe. So one of the things I thought we could do at this time, before we get into the next thing, is to talk for a second about breath. My brilliant wife teaches birthing classes. When we had our first child, she took some classes with a lady who taught her about breathing and how it can help relax. And so I remember watching her give birth, and 10 minutes before Elena was born, she had a smile on her face. I've got this picture of just, she's okay. She's breathing. She's relaxed. No anxiousness, no fear. She's breathing. And so I said to her, as a community, what could you give us that would enable us to maybe deal with this anxiety? And she said, how about some relaxation breathing? You breathe in for 4 seconds and you breathe out for 8 seconds. Apparently something happens when your exhale doubles your inhale. It brings you into a certain kind of rhythm. So I thought we would try it. We would breathe in for 4 and out for 8. If you're sitting at home with family and you feel a bit silly, it's okay. You can not do it. You could do it later. But for a second or two or a few seconds, I'm going to be on stage breathing. I'm going to look a little strange too, because I'm in a mostly empty room doing that. And so you can probably do it at home. But whenever you do try it, feel that sense of as you do, your body relaxes. And in this moment, as a digital community, we're going to invite this God of the universe to be with us as we breathe. One of the reasons you're probably anxious right now is because you're imagining a future. And that future seems vaguer right now. It's more uncertain. What will it look like? And that's normal when things like this happen. But one of the things we want to remind ourselves is when we feel anxious, I think it's quite often because when we're picturing that future, we don't imagine God in that future with us. He's with you in your today, and he will be with you in your future, if you will allow him to. One of the interesting things about future is that we sometimes have all these different ideas about what it's going to look like. And when we're honest, they're not all compatible anyway. They can't all happen. Sometimes we've got this bunch of fears, and the truth is they won't all happen. Maybe the future won't be exactly what you want it to be. But knowing that God is with you in it is a wonderful, wonderful thing. So let's for a second remember that this God of the universe loves you, and he is here with you. And he is here with us, spread out as we are across this capital district. So here we go, some breathing. God, as we breathe, be with us. Let us know your presence. And if you want to, for just a few seconds, continue just to find that rhythm. Let your body relax. This God loves you. He will not leave you. He will not forsake you. Know his peace as you breathe. Know his spirit as you breathe. Amen. And if that's the first time you've ever breathed as a group of people, I'm not surprised. Most people don't breathe in unison, but you have now. So welcome to that very strange, very interesting club. So the elephant in the room we've talked about a little bit, and now we're going to talk about a couple of other things. And I looked at what we were planning on talking about, and I was terrified to realize that we were talking about fasting. As part of our hunger series, we're looking at the ways hunger affects the world, how it affects us, how we can help people get more resources and not experience hunger. As bad as COVID-19 might be, there is this sense of 27,000 people a day die of hunger. This is huge. This is a worldwide problem. And we want to be a community that gets involved in dealing with that. So we've been talking about that for a couple of weeks before all this flared up, and we're going to continue to talk about it. But fasting, really talking about fasting when we're dealing with social isolation, we're dealing with being at home, maybe even the words like we're in quarantine. Do we really want to expect people to go without food? At its basic level, fasting has been this denial of food so you can experience God or have some kind of experience of something beyond yourself. And to say we're going to do that man, that doesn't sound right. That's like another misery on top of a big misery. My wife and I, just by random chance, happened to start Whole30 right before all this kicked off. Whole30 is this draconian diet where you reduce down to just whole foods. And day 10 is the most miserable, followed by day 11, which is today for us. It's the point where you're like, I'm going to quit this thing. I am done. You can only eat whole foods on this diet. That means that you can eat meat, and you can eat things like potatoes, but you can't eat any grains, no dairy. Essentially, if a food sounds fun, you cannot eat it. We have been surviving on dried mango as our fun thing for 10 days now. On the plus side, bacon is allowed, so I've eaten bacon almost every day. But it's like, I'm not sure how long I can do this for. And now to be quarantined while doing it, it's like, did I think the timing through? Well, I didn't know, so I'm a little stuck. I suggested to my wife that we should quit, but she said no, so I went along with that. She said if I quit now, she would never get me to do it again, and she's probably right, because it has not been fun at all. To picture like that sense of we're fasting and we're quarantining, it's not good, that's yuck. But as I thought about it more, I thought, do you know what? Fasting makes total sense to talk about now because you are doing it already. Fasting isn't just about the sense of giving up food. Fasting is giving up any appetite so that you can experience God. Think about, years ago, a guy called Maslow came up with the hierarchy of needs, and he talked about food, and he talked about water and clothing and these basic physiological needs, and he talked about the sense that, we need love and comfort and people around us, and they build up to this different hierarchy. But the base level ones, those are all the sorts of things that you can fast. You can give up almost anything in fasting. You could give up shopping, you could give up buying more clothes, you could give up going out and socializing, you could give up drinking alcohol, you could give up books, you could give up movies, all these different things you could give up. And every single one of us in this weird world that we're experiencing now is giving up something. We're in this world where it feels like, how there's the analogy of a rug being pulled out from under your feet. Maybe a better one would be those incredible waiters that have this ability to whip the tablecloth out from under on the table, and it leaves everything perfectly in place. They do it with such it's just gone, and everything's still there. Well, our world right now feels a little like someone did that, and everything landed on top of us. No magic trick, the lasagna, the red sauce, it's all over us. The wine, it's all over us. We're in a mess, it feels like. And so right now, you're probably giving up stuff that you may never have given up. You're stuck at home. Your pattern of life has changed. You are fasting right now. Think about your life as it was 2 weeks ago. You can probably highlight several changes. You maybe don't get to go to work anymore. Maybe that was a fun thing to you. You're working remotely. You miss people. Some of you are like, I've been waiting for this moment forever. Some of you, the introverts, you're like, finally the annoying guy next to me in the office, and by that I mean all of them, they've gone. They're like done for a while. So some of you are in heaven, but for some of us, it's a sacrifice. For some of you, you're trying to work while your kids are climbing all over you. We've seen the Jimmy Fallon videos, the guys doing the late night shows with their kids around, and it's tough. We're working in new ways. Some of you are losing money. Some of you are piece workers, some of you are gig workers, and you're like, my life doesn't look the same right now. There's a loss and a change in that. Every single one of us is giving up things. And the great thing there is that change sometimes provides this moment where we might get to do something different. Our lives could potentially look different in the future. I found this amazing clip from this movie, Pleasantville, set back, it's about 10, 15 years old at least. And in this movie, this town Pleasantville on TV is the perfect town. In the basketball games at high school, the boys drain constant three-pointers, just swishes through the net. The baseball team is hitting constant home runs. I don't know if they ever question the fact that if you're constantly hitting home runs, then the game would never end. There's an infinite number of runs, but in the movie, it seems to work fine. And the guy, he comes home every night, and his wife has dinner ready for him on the table. It works out perfectly. Every time he walks through the door, honey, I'm home. She's like, so good to see you. She gives him a kiss. His dinner's there until the day it isn't. And this is him processing that change with his friends who have experienced the same life that he's lived and are now questioning everything because for one day, dinner wasn't on the table when he got home. Let's check it out.
I came home like I always do. And I went in the front door. And I took off my coat. And I put down my briefcase. And I said, honey, I'm home. Only there was no one there. No wife. No lights. No dinner.
No dinner?
So, the town of Pleasantville experiences these transformations, and suddenly these guys that are used to a certain way of living, they're used to going home and dinner is on the table every night, they're used to going home and everything is clean and tidy. The guy has his classic line as he walks in, honey, I'm home, and she's always at the door, she's always waiting, and suddenly his life is different, and that's where they begin to change. Tension, difference, change, new things, actually they can produce a lasting change in us that loads of other things don't. There's a chance for some amazing growth during those times. There was a story a few years ago about the London Underground system, similar to the New York subway. And a couple of lines had closed down, and what they found was this. Some people had to change their whole routes, their whole pattern of how they went to work. And then once they'd done it for a while, even when the old lines opened, they never went back. Something about the new pattern had fitted them better in the end. And there's maybe ways that we will find that as well. But the fact is, we are essentially doing something like fasting. The patterns you usually follow, some of them, you're not doing them now. You've lost something. You've experienced change. That in itself is kind of like a fast. Fasting is simply giving up something, one of our appetites. For some of us, it might be eating. We might go without food for a while. For some of us, it might be consumerism. It might be buying more and more stuff. It can be anything that you use to fill yourself up. Maybe something that you use to feel good about life, something that you enjoy. All of us are giving up some stuff right now. That's fasting. So we may as well talk about it because to a certain degree, we're doing it anyway. I've got this really interesting passage that we're going to look at for just a second. It's in a book called Matthew in the Bible. Matthew is one of the first writers about Jesus. If you've never read the New Testament, that's fine. There's 4 writers about Jesus' lives. There's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And the first 3, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, are very similar. John, he's a little different, talks about a few different things. Some people would say he's a bit more spiritual. The others are more just, this is what Jesus did on day-to-day life. And so this story is in Matthew chapter 17. Jesus has taken his 3 closest disciples and he's taken them on a mountain. And they've had these incredible experiences while they're up there, and then they come back down to earth in this passage. When they came to the crowd, a man approached Jesus and knelt before him. Lord, have mercy on my son, he said. He has seizures and is suffering greatly. He often falls into the fire or into the water. I brought him to your disciples, but they could not heal him. You unbelieving and perverse generation, Jesus replied, how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy here to me. Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of the boy, and he was healed at that moment. Then the disciples came to Jesus in private and asked, why couldn't we drive it out? He replied, because you have so little faith. Truly I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. But this type does not come out without prayer and fasting. So, strange passage. There's probably some questions if you're new to a church thing, if you've not really read the Bible before. There's all these questions about, well, what does it mean by demons? And there's probably listening a spectrum of people, some people who are very comfortable with the idea of a spiritual realm, and maybe some of you that are less comfortable with that. And that's fine. We don't necessarily need to focus on that part. But what's interesting to me about this passage is these followers of Jesus thought that they were living full lives. They thought that this was a situation they would be able to deal with. They'd done some really cool stuff with Jesus before. And then there's this moment where they find themselves to be lacking. The life that they thought they had, the abilities, the general pattern of things, when it came down to it, it wasn't what they thought. And then they ask Jesus, well, why? Why couldn't we do this thing? And Jesus gives them this answer, says that their faith isn't strong enough, and says that if they had faith, they could do these incredible things. And then finally finishes with this really cryptic remark. This type can only come out by prayer and fasting. For years, what Christians have thought about as fasting is this. It's this sense of giving up an appetite, but not just for its own sake. It's not like a spiritual way to lose weight. It's not just not shopping for no reason. It's this sense of you give up the regular thing to fill up with the spiritual life. You give up an appetite to find God is really what it's saying. There's this sense of, I want to experience more. Our forced fasting that we're experiencing right now leads me to ask a couple of questions, which really are centered around, how, as we're fasting, are we finding ourselves to be emptier than we thought we were? When some of the peripheral things, the everyday things that we think make life worth living are taken away, are the ways that we're finding ourselves to be a little bit empty? The comedian Russell Brand, who is mainly known for his crazy antics and stuff, he's really out there, but he's written some really interesting stuff recently where he's talked about what it is to be an addict. He's been an addict for a huge period of his life. He's been addicted to sex. He's been addicted to drugs. He's been through incredibly difficult situations because of his addiction. But in his latest book, one of the things he said is this: most of us are addicted. He said, I'm lucky because I'm so addicted. I'm so out there. The things that I'm addicted to have messed me up to the point that I just, I'm a mess. I have to acknowledge it. But the truth is, he said, lots of people can live their whole lives addicted to things and not even realize. Maybe you realize towards the tail end of your life, but you can be addicted to good things. You can be addicted to work. You can be addicted to so many things. And I just wonder, is the sense that we're a little bit emptier than we realize at times? I wonder if maybe this time of reflection where we feel a little trapped helps us to question some of those things that we use to fill our lives up so often. Everyone's an addict, at least according to Russell Brand. And the second thing it makes me ask is, are there things that we use our everyday life to hide from? I've got this wonderful little clip of a guy being asked about quarantine and how he would choose to spend quarantine. So let's check him out and his thoughts on quarantine.
Because of coronavirus, you are going to be quarantined, but you have a choice. Do you A, quarantine with your wife and child, or B?
So this clip, super funny. He's got this sense of, man, I would do anything. I'd spend quarantine in any way that wasn't with my wife and kids, which maybe some of you are experiencing right now. Maybe some of you wives, if I could just lose my husband, I'd be fine. Some of you are definitely thinking, if I didn't have kids with me, quarantine might be a bit of a dream. I've been chatting to some of the introverts in the church, and they're loving the work at home environment. Some of you have got rid of annoying coworkers that have bugged you for years and are living this dream-like state right now. For some of us extroverts, it's a little more difficult. It's a little more challenging. We're talking to people we wouldn't usually talk to. But there's a chance that our regular life, it enables us to hide in some way. Maybe enables us to spend more time at the office than we do at home with our kids because sometimes it's easier. Maybe there's ways that we've been able to keep ourselves filled up with things that actually just aren't real. There's this sense that fasting, what we're doing right now, this giving up of certain things, it's revealing things about who we really are. Maybe it's revealing things about our world that actually don't make sense, and that there'll be a challenge to change them. In actual fact, whenever you do anything like fasting, the going without stuff, that actually gets fairly easy. I think we'll get to this place where if this is our new normal for a little while, we'll get used to it. I found that when I've done food fasting, actually by the second day in this weird way, it gets kind of addictive. I get kind of to this point where I want to go further and further and further. Okay, that might be something that you can't relate to, but that's been my experience of it. The actual difficult part with fasting is this. What do I fill up with? You create some space, and then you choose what you fill up with. So we live in a world where there's so much on demand. It's possible that we get the normal stuff taken away, and we just fill it up with stuff that still doesn't really matter. We binge watch whole series on Netflix, on Amazon Prime. We've got this huge catalog of stuff available to us. We fill it with other stuff that doesn't really matter. And I'm not saying don't do that at all. I think at this time, people are going to do different things just to feel like they're surviving. But there's also this incredible opportunity for you to experience God maybe in a way that you never have before. Maybe this is a time where you actually get to enter into some kind of spiritual life. In olden times, people used to call it the rule of life. They would talk about the pattern that they followed every day that enabled them to engage with God. Maybe that's for you when things are a little slower, just spending a few minutes, just spending time with God in the morning. Maybe a few words of prayer, maybe reading from the Bible. Just this chance to say, God, I would like to grow with you. That sense that we had earlier, the conversation we had about our fears for the future often don't imagine God with us in the future. God wants to be part of your tomorrow. But the only way that really happens is if we make him part of our today. So for us, as we spend this time with just more space, we get to enter into a life with God that maybe we never have before. If you're part of our OneChurch community, one of the things you can do is you can pray with us every day. We can choose as a community, even though we're split apart, even though we're in different places, to actually choose to pray. So one of the things I'm suggesting that we do is we get together and pray at the same time every day at 12 o'clock. Originally I said, how about 9 and 6? But I actually think there's something magical about everyone doing it at the same time. And if it doesn't work for you, any time that you pray is always a good time to pray. But what about if we were to take 12 minutes at 12 every day, something easy to remember, and just choose to take those 12 minutes to spend asking God to move in this country, in this world, asking him to keep our loved ones safe, asking him to use this time with us, asking him to use this time where we're going through change to grow at the same time. Maybe that's something that we'd come out the other side feeling different. The truth is, what we're going through right now, we will get through. In the huge scheme of the history of the world, it isn't the hardest thing we've been ever asked to do, or anyone's been asked to do. I read this wonderful quote the other day, and it said this: "And the people stayed home and read books, and listened and rested and exercised, and made art, and played games, and learned new ways of being, and were still, and listened more deeply. Some meditated, some prayed, some danced, some met their shadows, and the people began to think differently, and the people healed. And in the absence of people living in ignorant, dangerous, mindless, and heartless ways, the earth began to heal. And when the danger passed, the people joined together again. They grieved their losses, and made new choices, and dreamed new images, and created new ways to live and heal the earth fully, as they had been healed." It's a piece of poetry from Kitty O'Mara, and it's this sense of like, we're stuck away for a while, but the possibilities of what might happen during that time are wonderful. This is a time where there's so much opportunity to fear. And in fearing, we get to breathe and know that God gave us that breath. A few weeks ago, I talked about the idea that every one of us starts life with an in-breath and an out-breath. Starts with an exhale, that first moment, that first cry. And one day it starts with an inhale, and one day it'll end with an exhale. And none of us are promised tomorrow. But that breathing, it's the start of our life and the end of our life. Take that time in this moment to choose to breathe. Choose to experience this God in that breathing. As you're forced to fast, as you're forced to go without things you usually do, choose to fill up, not just with other things, but with this God. When we started this series talking about hunger, we started with one of the Beatitudes, this series of sayings that Jesus came out with in Matthew chapter 5. And we looked at one of them in this version of the Bible called the Message. It's a kind of a paraphrase. And what it said was this: blessed are you when you've worked up a good appetite for God. He's food and drink in the best meal you'll ever eat. This is what we're doing in this time. We're creating space. We get to choose to fill up and experience this God. So I'm going to pray for us as we close our first digital service. It's been different. I'm sure we'll get better at it. I'm sure I'll get better at it. I'm sure you'll get better at it. But right now it's what we have. But we know that in this weird way that we're gathered, that this God is still with us at this time. So let me pray for you, albeit through a computer screen. God, thank you that you're present with us as we've learned together. God, I pray that you would keep speaking to our community. Keep us as one, even though we feel far apart. Add new people to us, even in the distance. Even in this weird time, bring other people in. For my friends, my brothers and sisters that feel fearful at this time, may they know your presence in breathing. For those of us that aren't sure what the future looks like, may we know that you are with us today and will be with us tomorrow. God, we don't know what the future holds right now, but we know that you hold that future. Thank you, Jesus. Amen.